What is up, magical people? It's the Mystic here, and Angela is the newest character coming to Marvel Rivals in Season 4. And with her gameplay reveal trailer dropping recently, today we're going to be taking a look at her moves and predicting some of the best ways to counter her. As the first of hopefully many flying Vanguard characters, Angela's kit is one of the most unique we've seen so far. And since she hasn't officially launched yet, keep in mind that everything here will be speculation based on the trailer and other gameplay I've seen of her so far. But before we get into which heroes I think will counter Angela the best, let's break down her abilities and some of their potential use cases. From what I've seen of Angela's gameplay, it's clear that she has three major abilities that change depending on her stance, be it grounded or airborne. But starting off with her primary attack, in flight mode Angela has her Spear of Ichor's attack as her primary, where she attacks with her spear, and the damage the spear does is controlled by a meter that can be found underneath her reticle, which at full strength has the ability to launch enemies upwards. And while on the ground, her Axis of Ichor primary attack has a similar effect. Now notably, she's the only flying character in the roster so far without a ranged attack. This means that her main aerial roles will be harassing other flyers, diving enemy backlines, and displacing tanks. This means that unlike other flying characters, she can't simply hang out in the sky and do damage without needing to get up close and personal. When countering Angela, we're going to be taking advantage of this. Now, looking at her first ability mapped to the right mouse button, the name of this ability is Shielded Stance. This is where Angela deploys a shield with a limited health pool, which appears to be around 350 health. Now, notably, this is a pretty low health pool for the shield compared to other shield tanks in the game. So it seems like the shield will really only come out to protect Angela herself and create an opening for an escape. But like her primary attack, she can also gain attack charge from damage dealt to her shield. And similar to Captain America, the shield ability itself has a 1 to 2 second cooldown before being able to be used again. Now her next ability is going to be called Assassin's Charge. This is where she lunges forward with her spear, grabbing and knocking back opponents, which looks very similar to Wolverine's Feral Leap. Now one important detail to note is that it actually consumes a resource meter. So once Angela actually connects, the enemy remains bound only until that meter is depleted. So in other words, she can't really carry away opponents indefinitely. She's also resistant to knockback and being launched while performing this ability. However, it looks like she can be stunned immediately before it connects and immediately after her resource gauge is drained. Now that's going to be a pretty important fact to keep in mind. I'm going to circle back around when we talk about which characters are going to counter her. And then her final main ability is going to be Divine Judgment when she's mid-air, but it'll be called Winged Ascent when she is grounded. But when she's in flight mode, using it causes her to slam down on the ground, creating an AoE effect that damages enemies and does tick damage over time to enemies in the AoE radius. Now while in the AoE radius, she gains increased attack speed and up to 200 bonus health from all attacks that connect. And while on the ground, using this ability quickly launches her into the air, doubling as escape tool. Now it is very important to note there is a 12-second cooldown on it, specifically when going from grounded to flying. This is pretty good because it ensures that the ground slam attack isn't spammable. Once she's back up in the air, she has to wait 12 seconds to use it again if she's already used it. But now finally we're on to her ultimate attack. This one's called Heaven's Retribution, and when using it, Angela throws her spear down on the ground, creating an AoE blast. She can then dash directly to the spear and continue attacking, and while inside the radius, she gains additional extra health, similar to Thor's lightning confinement. Now, any enemies that are hit by the initial blast appear to be bound within the radius of the spear, but the major downside of this ult is that Angela herself must stay within the AoE's range in order to gain that increased attack speed and bonus health buff. So this means when you're looking to counter ult it or counter attack this ult, it's good to take advantage of the fact that in order for her to get full effectiveness from it, she has to stay within the range of the spear. This basically means that she's going to be a sitting duck while taking advantage of her ult, so do with that information what you will. But now that I've gone over her abilities and their use cases, let's take a look at the first group of heroes that I think are going to counter her, and that would be the... Now there are 3 Vanguard characters specifically that I think are going to cause Angela some problems. The first is going to be the Thing. Now because the Thing is immune to displacement abilities, this basically means that her Assassin's Charge is going to be useless against him. And since Angela herself lacks any ranged attacks, that means she's pretty much always going to be in the Thing's effective range, both on the ground and in air. Now in that same vein, I think that Emma Frost is going to be a good counter pick as well. Her Diamond Form also makes her immune to displacement abilities, and then her Command Grab in Diamond Form can also be used to cancel Angela's grabs or as a quick escape tool from Angela. Now while it's entirely possible that Angela could be immune to Emma's grab, there quite literally is no other hero that is, so it's reasonable to assume that she won't be either. Now the third Vanguard that I think is primarily going to give Angela some issues has to be Groot. You see, Angela's kit relies on having open paths to dive and grab. And with Groot's ability to litter the battlefield with walls, he's able to directly interfere with her playstyle. Now, a few honorable mentions in the Vanguard category that I'd like to bring up would have to be Hulk and Penny Parker. Both have stun abilities, which can probably interrupt Angela's grabs. And then Hulk's leap gives him a vertical reach that can help contest her mid-air. And then the fact that Penny has a ranged poke primary attack in her kit lets her deal damage to Angela from far away. Now, look, I know I said that there were 3 tanks that were going to be primarily good against Angela, but I think Penny's also going to be pretty good too. Penny is going to be solid for some zone denial whenever Angela does land, setting up mines for her and setting up Penny's spider bots. I think is going to do a good job at contesting Angela when she's grounded. But now that we covered the Vanguard characters that are going to be good counters against Angela, it's time we move on to the Duelist characters. But before we actually do that, I do want to shameless plug a little bit. If you guys didn't know, I actually have my own Discord server. And going into the season, I am looking for some players to play with. Maybe climb the ranks a little bit in competitive. So if you guys are interested in that, I'll leave a link in the description down below, as well as maybe a pinned comment. There you can keep up to date with my newest Marvel Rivals videos, share some strategies and whatnot, and, you know, generally just hang out, you know, chop it up with your boy. But shameless plug aside, let's go ahead and get back to the main focus of the video. So now we're going to turn our attention to what duelists I think are going to be good counters against Angela. And when it comes to duelist counter picks against her, Angela, like most flying characters, has natural counters. And that's of course going to be ranged, projectile, and hit scan characters, especially those with good mobility tools. So here we're talking characters like Hela, Phoenix, even Punisher. They can all target her mid-air and keep their distance on the ground, and they can use their mobility abilities as escape tools against her grabs. Now I might show my bias a little bit here, but one character in particular I think is going to be good against Angela has to be my boy Namor. Because if you consider the fact that Angela's kit really seems like she's meant to be a dive character, the #1 counter pick against most dive characters has to be Namor. With his squids that have aimbot and can track airborne enemies really well, as well as his projectile attacks that have large hitboxes and no damage drop off, he can safely hang back and throw logs at Angela from across the map. And then if and when Angela decides to dive the backline, he can use his squids here as an effective countermeasure. Not only that, but his whale ultimate ability, as well as most duelists with a good AoE ultimate ability, can help apply pressure to Angela when she's doing her ult. Being able to counter ult with a big AoE attack helps sort of deny her the value of her ultimate. So to summarize, for duelists, picking duelists that are primarily ranged, who have good escape tools and maybe even some CC abilities, as well as some good AoE ultimate abilities, is generally going to be a good idea in terms of countering Angela. But now that we've broken down the duelist category, it's time to turn our attention to the strategists that are going to be optimal against Angela. So the first strategist that I have in mind here is going to be Big Jeff the Land Shark. And Jeff is my first pick for a few reasons. One, his hide and seek ability makes him immune to displacement, basically nullifying Angela's spear dash. Also in Season 4, it looks like Jeff's ult is getting a pretty big upgrade. Now whenever he activates his ult, it leaves a healing AoE, which can be perfect against countering Angela's ult. Also in theory, his ult could be used to maybe swallow allies that are trapped inside of Angela's ult, and maybe even swallow Angela herself. I'm not sure if maybe she's immune to that. I don't think she's immune to much other CC attacks, so I'm not sure why she would be impervious to Jeff's ult, but I mean, you never know. We'll definitely have to get into Season 4 to see if that's effective. The next strategist that I think is going to have some good counterplays against Angela has to be Invisible Woman. And in this season in particular, her ult gets a huge buff. Not only does it last longer, but it also inflicts slow on enemies that are inside of it. So this means that her ultimate ability is almost the perfect counter to Angela's, because it can heal up any allies that are caught in Angela's ult, and it can also inflict slow on Angela herself, which almost negates the attack speed buff that she gets from it. Also, Invisible Woman has a really good crowd control ability, and that's her push ability, which you can use to push Angela and interrupt her grab, or pull allies away from the grab, meaning it's a good way to interrupt Angela and protect other teammates. And then of course, aside from Invisible Woman, Luna Snow and Mantis respectively with their stuns are a pretty good option as well. And then while these characters aren't uniquely counters, both Rocket and Cloak and Dagger have AoE ultimates that could both probably be used effectively against Angela's ult. So there's not really any particular bad pick against Angela per se. The obvious one to avoid would be Ultron, because Ultron is basically just free booty for Angela. And then, you know, there's like Adam Warlock, who is just a DPS character. So remember, Angela's primary strength lies in her mobility and her displacement abilities. But because she lacks ranged options and relies heavily on her ultimate's zone control, teams that bring ranged duelists, unmovable vanguards, and strategists with tools to help mitigate her ult will consistently be able to limit her effectiveness. But with that said, it looks like we've reached the end of today's video. As always, if you guys liked it, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new here, might as well subscribe and check out the Discord. I am the Mystic, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.